At the weekend, Donald Trump signed an executive order cutting off US funding to South Africa due to its foreign policy positions and to alleged state-sponsored discrimination against Afrikaners. Titled Addressing Egregious Actions of the Republic of South Africa, it targets countless government policies designed to dismantle equal opportunity in employment, education and business, and hateful rhetoric and government actions fueling disproportionate violence against racially disfavored landowners. The order also arranges a relief and resettlement plan for so-called Afrikaner refugees escaping government-sponsored race-based discrimination. This comes as no surprise and follows a week of hostile comments about SA's newly signed Expropriation Act by Mr. Trump and those close to him.
Mr. President, so on Truth Social, you said that you were going to cut aid from South Africa. Will you plan to cut aid across other African nations, and why South Africa?
No, it's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
At home, parties from across the board were quick to refute these claims, to defend the act and to reaffirm the rights of a democratically elected government. Threatened by the loss of R8 billion worth of American aid, mostly funding HIV treatment, research and prevention, President Ramaphosa did not back down. We will not be bullied, he warned in his State of the Nation address.
We will not be deterred. We are, as South Africans, a resilient people, and we will not be bullied. We will stand together as a united nation, and we will speak with one voice in defense of our national interests, our sovereignty, and our constitutional democracy.
But the truth is, the Expropriation Act is a controversial one even in the national sphere. So let's look at what it says, how it will affect private property, and whether Trump and critics at home have any reason to worry. I'm Julien Trevian, you're watching Johannesburg Journal.
My fellow South Africans,
take note of what is happening in South Africa.
The date for the demise of the white minority regime has been determined.
Listen properly.
It's over. It's a fourth Rugby World Cup for South Africa.
With what we have gone through, we can't allow this, Madam Speaker.
Well, let me tell you something.
The ANC is falling even further into the ground.
You are not showing the comrades a way to eat.
Shut up! Shut up! I want to hear a pin drop.
Land expropriation has been a hot topic for years. Black South Africans, who represent 80% of the population, only own about a quarter of the country's farmland. The government aims to transfer a third of it by 2030, but things are moving slowly, and the matter has been picked up politically by various groups. On one side, the likes of the economic freedom fighters are campaigning for expropriation without compensation to speed up land reform. Their 2024 election manifesto planned for all land to be expropriated and redistributed as land use rights, half of which would go to black South Africans by 2029. The Redbirds voted against the Expropriation Act in 2024, calling it an attempt to fool our people. On the other side, organizations like AfriForum and the Solidarity Movement have opposed an act that significantly jeopardizes private property rights and launched a three-point campaign against it. Whilst the first two consisted in legal opposition to the Expropriation Act's implementation, the third involves a targeted international campaign that has been picked up by the American right.
We want to also show appreciation to President Trump as well as of course the US government for recognizing and identifying the discrimination that Afrikaners are experiencing through racial legislation, through the BLA Act, through threats to property rights. Of course, hopefully that would help to also urge the various parties also in this country to go to the negotiation table
to find amicable solutions that's in the interest of all in the country.
That's nothing new. For years, AfriForum have been pushing the flawed narrative that Afrikaners are being targeted by the state, that the ANC is trying to strip white farmers of their land. Now, that does not mean no land has ever been expropriated in SA. Just like in the US, the state sometimes has to take over private property to build roads, schools, hospitals, dams, and that's called expropriation. But South Africa's constitution protects private property, and in line with the Expropriation Act of 1975, in effect until this year, anyone who's had to give away their land to the state has been compensated, often more even than market value, experts say. Here's the president of AgriSA, the country's largest agricultural organization.
What we just see as farmers in South Africa is we don't see a confiscation of land. We don't see large-scale land grabs in South Africa. What we see is at this stage still very reasonable, as is any country in the world. So we don't see what he's talking about, and that's why we thought we should just, from our side, set the facts straight.
Yeah. The new act is not a revolution. It repeals the previous one from 1975, reminds the constitutional right to private property, and tells how the state's power to expropriate may be exercised. There are two conditions. For public purpose, that's to build infrastructure that will benefit South Africans, or public interest, that's redressing racial imbalances in access to land or resources. Any expropriation, the law says, must follow an agreement between the owner and the state on the amount compensated. This amount is determined by looking at the market value, the current use of the property, or the state's plans for the area. Disputes must be settled in court. Now, the law does talk about expropriation with nil compensation. That means land or property may be expropriated without payment within a narrow set of circumstances, including, but not limited to, where the land is not being developed by the owner, even if the owner is an organ of state, where the owner has abandoned the property, leaving it in a state of disrepair, or where the public funds invested in the land's acquisition are higher than the current market value. Overall, the law is rather protective of private property. The Expropriation Act is not a confiscation instrument, President Ramaphosa posted on X. Property developers have welcomed it and the opportunity to expropriate without compensation. Many believe it will facilitate urban renewal by allowing the recovery and development of hijacked buildings, for example those in the Johannesburg CBD. The DA aren't quite as optimistic, mostly because of procedural aspects, and they're looking at legal action to have the act amended. But like all GNU member parties, they've been clear that land confiscation did not and would not happen in South Africa. The DA Minister for Public Works and Infrastructure, Jean McPherson, was straightforward. "I want to be unequivocal," he wrote. "No one in South Africa is having their land confiscated. As the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, land grabs will never be allowed. This is my commitment to the people of South Africa and our partners around the world." The entire government is engaging with American partners to clarify SA's intentions, but it is unclear how successful they can be. Just like Elon Musk, several of Trump's advisors have experience with South Africa and strong positions too. And let's not forget, the White House doesn't only disapprove of the Expropriation Act. SA's stance on the Israel-Hamas conflict, the genocide case at the International Court of Justice, and our country's membership of the BRICS Plus, alongside Russia, China or Iran, don't act in our favour. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has already announced that he would not attend the G20 summit in Johannesburg later this year, and Trump's rumoured pick for US ambassador in Pretoria basically told News 24 the world was tired of South Africa trying to address the past, that it was time to move on. This takes us to the end of this explainer. Thank you for watching. You can support Johannesburg Journal by subscribing and by liking, commenting and sharing this video. Until next time, Salagatli.